At one time, 1 in 4 Alabamians belonged to a labor union. The intersection of race and labor organizing has often been met with violent repression, but nevertheless, folks did it.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Speaking of teachers, we have a former history teacher on our live line. No stranger to America's workforce. His name is Adam Keller. He is the co-host and co-producer of the Valley Labor Report, which is growing. We're going to get into that. TVLR.fm is a website. Adam, welcome back to the show. And I want to thank you. You really helped me out here, and I'm sure this is growing on your behalf. The feature that you started, actually 2 of them, last week in Southern Labor and also Boss Watch. And it's a compilation of what's going on, obviously, in labor, various unions organizing, what's going on in various locals. And Boss Watch, and, well, it kind of explains itself because there's a lot of bosses that skirt the law and do not treat their workers fairly. So welcome back to the show. I have to ask you, Adam, what's their reaction to those features that you started not too long ago? Go ahead.
Hey, Flash, it's great to be here as always, and appreciate you lifting up both of those features that we do. We do them both as regular segments on our show, which, of course, folks can find on the radio and YouTube, podcast, all that good stuff. But we also put it out as email newsletters because we know that's another way to reach folks. And like you said, it's a compilation. So we hope it's useful for folks. What we found when we started doing research for our show years ago is that there's frankly just not a lot of folks who are compiling what's happening with unions across the South, or in the case of Boss Watch, criminal activities of companies and bosses throughout the South. And we do have some news to report on that. Our Boss Watch segment and newsletter is going to have to change a little bit. What my process has been over the years has been to search the Department of Labor, OSHA, MSHA, the EEOC, EPA, these other agencies that, theoretically are here to protect workers and hold companies accountable when they exploit workers and violate our rights. And this will probably not come as a shock to most listeners, but since January 20th, I have not been able to find any new press releases from any of these agencies announcing any new enforcement. So either companies and bosses are all on their best behavior right now, and nobody's breaking the law, and nobody's exploiting children, and nobody's stealing wages, and nobody's hurting workers on the job with poor safety, right? So either we believe that, or these agencies are not enforcing the law and protecting workers' rights at this time, which is a huge concern for us, beyond the fact that obviously our method's going to have to change in terms of reporting out this kind of material. That's just a huge concern because every week, I would find these cases, and I just focused on the South, but every week we would find cases of wage theft, illegal child labor, just terrible safety incidents on the job resulting in death and injury. And so it's a real concern to not see that happening. The press release is happening, and we can only assume the enforcement is not happening right now. I will say the other, change to this is we've actually partnered with Labor Lab, which is a great outfit, and they do a lot of research on union busters. And so now we are highlighting union busters of the week and putting a spotlight on these, consulting firms, legal firms, and various individuals and outfits that are engaging in union busting, whether it's legal or illegal. We want to put a spotlight on that. And often we find that some of the campaigns we're tracking in Last Week in Southern Labor pop up in Labor Lab's research when they find union busters at those particular work sites. Because when we do Last Week in Southern Labor, we search the National Labor Relations Board website. We look for all the new filings across the South and the American colonies as well. We also look at the campaign updates, new election results or withdrawals of union filings. And you also will not be surprised to hear that often when there's a decertification attempt, in various locals. The Right to Work Foundation and other creepy entities like that are frequently involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been, I will say I have learned tremendously from this process. And we hear from a lot of labor leaders and journalists, even and other folks who started subscribing to the newsletter at tblr.fm. And they are happy to get this information. And we do throw in some political updates that we find is, relevant to labor in the South. But again, a lot of union filings, union elections. So if you want some hard data to see, what's happening across the South in terms of new organizing, it's a great way to stay informed.
Yeah, this administration is embarking on the theme. Well, if it's not reported, it didn't happen. And to your point, no more press releases, which is going to make your job all that more difficult. I'm wondering here, do you have a plan of action to get this information, perhaps using social media, maybe workers speaking out, picking it up from there? That's where I'm going. I don't know where you're going with it. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be key, is getting more tips from listeners and viewers about bad boss stories, and letting us know what's going on out in the community. We're also just going to have to dig deeper into the media and trust that media is going to help pick up some of the slack as well. But that is a dangerous prospect to assume, though, that media, especially local media, down here in a place like Alabama, is in a good enough place to really do these sort of investigations and keep track of injuries on the job and other, criminal activities that are taking place inside of workplaces. So it's going to take a community effort, and we're really hoping to get a lot more tips from our listeners to let us know what's going on.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tblr.fm/donate.
Well, Adam, the good news is the Valley Labor Report is expanding its reach. And I was reading earlier about a couple of new markets here. Talk to me about them.
Yeah, we're really excited. 2025, we have kicked off with an expansion of our radio footprint. So we have expanded to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Montgomery, Alabama. And those are really important markets for a couple of reasons. Obviously, Chattanooga is pretty close to us, still technically part of the Tennessee Valley. We're in Huntsville, Alabama, is where we're based. And Montgomery is the state capital, so very important politically. But both of those regions are home to UAW organizing. We know Chattanooga was the site of UAW's successful campaign at Volkswagen. They are negotiating for a first contract right now. And Montgomery area is home to the Hyundai supply chain and Hyundai facilities. So, a lot of organizing auto workers in that region as well. A lot of union folks in those areas. So we're really excited to be engaging with those communities. We're now on 6 radio stations across 4 states, which is just wild to me. We started out as just on 1 station, an hour and a half. We now do 3 hours every week. And yeah, like I said, we're on 6 stations across 4 states. And our YouTube audience continues to grow as well. We've gotten over 12,000 subscribers, and, thinking back to where we started 4 or 5 years ago, it's pretty amazing to see the growth. And it's been interesting to get the engagement from the audience, because we've had a lot of folks who call in, leave voicemails, chat on the YouTube page. And, it's clear we're reaching pretty diverse, segments of the population. Something funny happened a couple weekends ago where we had a pro-Trump individual call in, followed by a communist who called in. And I don't know many radio shows where that's happening, especially to talk strictly about, labor issues and, how politics affects working people, issues on the job. Right. And I think that's what is resonating with folks, because there's not a lot of media out there that talks about our experiences as working people. And if they do talk about politics, you can find plenty of that, but it's not necessarily from our perspective as working folks, and especially as union folks. So it's been exciting to see that growth and to get the engagement. Whenever you're attracting trolls and things like that, you're getting attention. And so
Yeah, yeah,
just appreciate the support. We can't do it without the grassroots support, and we can't do it without the network of really, great folks like yourself who've been supportive, who've come on the program. We've had some amazing guests that, I think we've punched above our weight in terms of booking some really brilliant people who I think can shed light on the issues that we're facing today.
yeah. Well, that's what makes radio or podcasting all that more exciting when you have that dynamic, like the pro-Trump supporter followed by the communists. I mean, that's amazing that you're able to do that, especially because you have such a wide range of listeners right now. So I was reading earlier, the Alabama legislative session started about a week ago, and same old tricks, it sounds like. Why don't you give us a rundown of what the agenda looks like? Go ahead, Adam.
Well, the Alabama legislative session starting is always a scary prospect for me and for a lot of folks down here because, as you said, yeah, they're up to some of the usual tricks of attacking working folks, particularly marginalized communities. The Governor Kay Ivey gave her State of the State address, and she mentioned some key priorities, including being tough on crime, which is interesting because Alabama already has one of the highest incarceration rates on planet Earth. And our prisons, oh, by the way, are unconstitutional. Every single day they're in operation. That's already been determined by the Department of Justice. But that said, so there's also attacks on the unemployment system. That's a really dangerous bill that is being floated through right now. But there's also some good news, and I'm always looking for some good news down in Montgomery. Governor Kay Ivey did announce that she was supporting paid maternity leave for state and education employees. That's an issue I've been working on for quite some time, and I know a lot of other folks have as well. We'd love to see it, be expanded to full paid parental leave for all workers ultimately, because we know that how important it is for new parents to be home with their children in those early weeks, and how important that is to recruiting and retaining employees. But that said, it's good news that the governor came out in support of it. Made a lot of traction last year, and we're hoping to get that through this year. It's worth noting we do have a Republican supermajority, so what they determine inside their caucus can ultimately set the agenda, but often getting them to all agree on the same agenda can be the tricky thing for them, because there's just a lot of even within the Republican caucus, you have some districts that are incredibly rural. You have some, fairly urban districts and suburban districts that are wealthier. So there's disparities to, for them to address internally. But another issue that is coming up in the legislature that our Labor Council is working with Alabama Rise and Jobs to Move America, other allies, to push Senate Bill 22, which would strip tax incentives from companies that violate child labor laws. And we think this is a huge opportunity to put a tool back in the toolbox for corporate accountability. We've really seen a rise of illegal child labor across the country, including here in Alabama. It was pretty famously uncovered that there was illegal child labor happening in the Hyundai supply chain. And so this is going to be an important step forward, and made it pretty far last year. Even fairly business aligned politicians are scared to come out in favor of illegal child labor. So we're hoping we can make some progress on that bill. Our Labor Council put out a petition just last week. We're trying to drum up support for it. So it's a mixed bag. There's another key issue is healthcare. As I've talked about on this show plenty of times, Alabama is one of only 10 states that did not expand Medicaid. So we have hundreds of thousands of folks who are caught in that healthcare coverage gap where they make too much to qualify for our really strict Medicaid program, but not enough to afford private health insurance. And the supermajority's leader in the House has announced that Medicaid expansion is not something he is prioritizing this year, in part because, well, the federal situation is so unclear right now. We don't know what's going to happen to Medicaid as it exists. We don't know what's going to happen to the Medicaid expansion program under the Affordable Care Act. So there's a lot of questions there, but ultimately that leaves us still in this crisis where we have so many of our neighbors without health care, people who are suffering and dying every single year without this policy enacted. And we have hospitals that are closing throughout the state, with many other hospitals on the verge of bankruptcy because we have not expanded Medicaid and because they continue to deal with uncompensated care. And we have medical debt that is a huge problem in many, many areas of the state. And unfortunately, to try to make matters worse, we have a special interest group that is pushing a junk health plan that they're trying to legalize. And it would not be real health insurance. It would not be regulated by the Affordable Care Act in terms of pre-existing conditions and requirements to actually fulfill, your health care needs. And they have a lot of support in the legislature right now. So that's an issue that we're dealing with. Our labor council signed on to a letter against this bill. I know the Cover Alabama Coalition will be fighting hard against that. So we have our work cut out for us this year. But as I said, there are a few opportunities to make gains for working class folks. If we can make some gains in terms of regulating some of these corporations and temp agencies, if we can push through, parental leave or some version of that for state and education employees, it would be a step in the right direction and hopefully can build some momentum to really, put some of these politicians into question as to whose side are you on? Are you on working people's side? Are you just representing the wealthy elites and the business interests down there?
Yeah. I think we know the answer to that one, Adam. All right, let's move on to Black History Month. This month is Black History Month. I know you've done a deep dive into Alabama's history. Not pretty, not pretty. The good news is the tradition, a very strong tradition, I understand, in your state of Black labor organizing. Can you speak to that, Adam?
Yeah, it is Black History Month, and I wanted to just, while I was here, bring up some of the rich labor history here in Alabama and across the South. Listeners know we have a pretty ugly history when it comes to race, when it comes to a lot of things, frankly, in the history of our state and our region down here. But we also have a rich resistance of struggle and resistance, and folks who organize for better, organize for change, and help to make change. So we do have a really rich labor history in Alabama. We're pretty famously a right to work state, very hostile to unions politically and, from the establishment. But at one time, 1 in 4 Alabamians belonged to a labor union. And the intersection of race and labor organizing, has often been met with violent repression. But nevertheless, folks did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the coal miners are a great example. And I know my co-host Jacob brings them up all the time because the coal miners were organizing interracially since the beginning. And even at the height of Jim Crow, we had coal miners organizing black and white, coming together, striking companies, fighting for better wages, fighting for better safety conditions, fighting to end the convict lease labor system that was so just awful, really, for so many people, particularly Black folks. And so coal miners, are a great example to point to. We had a lot of interracial organizing in the late 19th century during the populist era. Arguably they won the governor's mansion, but it was undone by one of the most corrupt elections in our state's history. Shortly after that, the racist Bourbon Redeemers rewrote the state constitution in 1901 to really enshrine white supremacy, in part in reaction to seeing Black and white working people and poor folks coming together and building power together. It really scared the powers that be. And we have that rich tradition throughout the history of our state, and we have a lot of Black labor leaders throughout the history of our state. We had the radical organizing of Black sharecroppers during the 1930s that Robin D.G. Kelley wrote so greatly about. Of course, we know the heart of the civil rights movement, and I would argue Dr. King is himself one of our greatest labor leaders. And one that I wanted to point out that I learned of more recently was Hattie Canty. And she was born near Mobile, Alabama back in the 30s, moved to Las Vegas in the 70s, and ended up becoming president of the Culinary Workers Union, and was the first Black woman to be the president of that union, the first room attendant elected to that position. And during her tenure, led the longest strike in U.S. labor history, leading workers at the Frontier Hotel. And so that's one of those stories that I think is really inspirational and points to that rich history we have in the state of resistance and struggle for justice. So despite the ugliness, despite the racist powers that have so often dominated in the state, there have always been Black folks and white folks and Hispanic folks and people of all colors and races and religions who have come together and recognized that we have common interest as working people. And we all want better lives for ourselves and our families and our communities. And when we organize together across these divisions, we really can make positive change. And so I think that's a really important lesson to take away this Black History Month.
Well done, my man. Coming from a former history teacher, I love what you just said. What's amazing too is what you brought up about changing the Constitution. They didn't like the laws that were progressive, so they changed the Constitution in Alabama in 1901. Amazing. Adam, great job. Thank you so much. Adam Keller, co-host, co-producer of the Valley Labor Report. TVLR.fm is a website you want to go to. You take care. We'll talk to you down the road. Okay, brother?
Love and solidarity from Alabama. Y'all take care.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.
Which side are you on?